is there a kid that ever lived here? And I said, as far as I know, the first person who owned the house had a child who died of leukemia or something. And she's like, came to see me last night. And I was like, what? And she said, a kid came to the foot of my bed. It was not my child, and tried to talk to me.
Hey guys, welcome to Everyday Finance. Real Vision co-founder and renowned macroeconomist Raoul Pal provides a thorough analysis of the future of cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin. He stresses that the near $100,000 rally in Bitcoin is a part of a larger macroeconomic story and is not merely a technical move. Spot Bitcoin ETF inflows of about $3.6 billion in just 2 weeks show that institutional money is pouring in. With the help of this capital infusion, Bitcoin rose from the 93,000 to 95,600 range to almost 98,000, which was its highest level in 10 weeks. Annualized premiums, however, are lagging in the neutral 6 to 7% range, indicating that futures markets are being cautious. This indicates that traders do not have excessive leverage, which reflects uncertainty in the face of global macro risks, such as the trade dispute between the United States and China, and growing concerns about a recession. Although Bitcoin is frequently referred to as digital gold, Pal clarifies that its relationship to equity markets casts doubt on its suitability as a true hedge. The options market, however, presents a more optimistic picture. The fact that the skew has shifted in favor of calls or wagers on higher prices suggests that market makers and whales are covertly getting ready for a possible breakout. Pal says that with leverage under control and geopolitical tensions still unresolved, Bitcoin may resemble the S&P 500 in the near future. But it is poised for a significant upside surprise if the right circumstances materialize.
It started getting interesting because I'm not one of these
Yeah,
UFO
please.
people. I've not been obsessed by aliens. I've not been obsessed by science fiction. I'm not a science fiction guy, and I've read like 2 science fiction books in my entire life. I didn't come from any of that. It was ghosts.
Okay.
And what I try and do is think about things that happen that are the edges of reality and ask myself, could they be reality? And in which case, what worldview would I have to have for them to be true? And I've had enough encounters with friends who've had encounters with ghosts. I have not. And the mythology of ghosts is so prevalent through all of human history, it's hard to believe it doesn't exist. So what are they? Well, we don't know. There's something I'm sure we'll talk about in this as well. What is that? What is going on there? Is that time? Is that remnants of consciousness? Is it what? I don't know. And then I watched a documentary around UFOs. And then it dawned on me it was exactly the same thing, which is, here is a story that humanity has always told. I read the Graham Hancock book, The Fingerprints of the Gods. And it was like, while neither accepting it nor rejecting, I just kept it in my head. It's like, yeah, there's something weird about these leaps of human knowledge, which we don't even understand, like the pyramids or the Nazca lines or whatever it may be. And so I just stored it in the back of my head, and then watching this documentary about all of these UFO experiences, you realize, A, the similarity in storytelling across all of history, and that they seem to be observational. There's something going on that I start to think, well, this is somewhere like ghosts. There's something at the edge of reality of which we don't yet understand. And then our conversations, the idea of consciousness, and then realizing that consciousness is something that we're thinking about today, physics and philosophy, but was in the Vedic principles 3,500 years ago. You're like, there's something, all of this is weird. And what I'm seeing is physics, philosophy, and a lot of different studies, mathematics, all coming to similar conclusions that maybe things like the fundamental underpinning to the universe is not space-time, but consciousness or information or whatever it may be, and some of these things. And somewhere within that, there is something to do with ghosts and aliens. That's what's in my head. And I thought, I want to have this conversation with somebody because most people can't have it. And as you said, we're not experts. We're trying to figure out bits that we have absorbed and we can reject and accept and throw some stuff around. So that's where I came at it from.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the ghost story one's great. I think everyone, if you ask them, they'll know someone. If they haven't had one themselves, they'll know someone that's had a wild ghost story that they can't explain.
Yeah, I mean, I had a house in Spain, and some friends of mine came from Singapore, and their kids were in a spare bedroom. They were in the main bedroom. One of the kids woke up in the middle of the night, jumped into their bed. So the mother went across to the kids' bedroom, went to sleep. She came down in the morning and said, is there a kid that ever lived here? And I said, as far as I know, the first person who owned the house had a child who died of leukemia or something. And she's like, came to see me last night. And I was like, what? And she said, a kid came to the foot of my bed. It was not my child, and tried to talk to me. And I'm like, wow. And we'd had weird things happening in that house. Like my neighbor would call me up from Spain when I was living in London saying, somebody's turning on your lights. I'm like, there's nobody there. We'd find things moved around the house, like a radio, and it'd be put by that kid's bed. And we were asking the person who'd look after the house, have you been there? Have you had a nap? What's going on? Nobody could ever explain it. It was never a bad thing. It was a thing. And it's like, after that, I'm like, okay, A, it freaks me out, but B, maybe there's something more than I understand.
There is a subtle but significant change in sentiment beneath Bitcoin's steady ascent. Bitcoin still trails gold, which has risen to a valuation of about $21.7 trillion, despite briefly surpassing silver's market capitalization and flirting with new highs. This serves as a reminder to investors that Bitcoin has room to expand as a global store of value. Crypto derivatives, however, are giving positive signals. The reversal in options skew indicates that sophisticated investors are becoming more optimistic, despite the conservative nature of futures traders. In stark contrast to just a few weeks ago, market participants are now placing more bets on price increases than declines. Crucially, the current rally is more sustainable because this optimism isn't accompanied by risky over-leveraging. According to analysts, this type of market structure, bullish sentiment combined with prudent risk management, may create the conditions for Bitcoin to suddenly surpass its psychological barrier of around $100,000. But it's not a straight line. Geopolitical and broader economic factors continue to be significant factors. Bitcoin may remain range-bound with stocks if risk sentiment continues to rule markets. However, if the core themes of cryptocurrency, decentralization, scarcity, and digital sovereignty resonate in the face of financial instability, we might witness another breakout that surprises even experienced traders.
Would you explain, because I think it's going to get into the aliens thing, because it's all the same kind of concept. What would you think of as ghosts? What are they? Because we've framed conversations about consciousness, quantum, all sorts of stuff in the past. So where would you put them in that? Is it explainable?
Well, again, in this last conversation, we talked about what is the fundamental nature of reality, right? Is it a dead material universe which consciousness arises from? Or is it consciousness is the ground of everything, and then all this material stuff is almost like a video game engine that we use to interface with other conscious entities and the main consciousness itself? It's leaning towards that consciousness is the fundamental thing. That seems to be, the evidence is pointing a little more in that direction these days. So if that's our arena of ideas and of where we're kind of playing in, there's all sorts of different entities that can be interacted with through, maybe through ghost experiences that people have. Obviously, they happen when people have psychotic breaks and other, mental things. They happen through meditation. So anyone that's gone down the meditative path, really, really heavily, pretty much all of them have entity encounters and have visions and all sorts of things. There's obviously the psychedelic realm. So people that take the stronger psychedelics like DMT and stuff frequently see entities of all sorts of different types, and ayahuasca and stuff like that. And then you've got the alien stuff. And then you've got the whole pantheon of gods, all the Hindu gods. You've got these Christian stories like the Wheel of Ezekiel and all these different other visions. So I think there's kind of like a whole arena of different entities. You've got Carl Jung's archetypal entities, which are different type of archetypes. You've got the tarot. There's all sorts of different things that kind of play. And to me, it's not entirely obvious that they're all external. So, given I've had some personal experience with those heavier psychedelics and also meditation, and I've had a pretty wild entity experience actually on DMT.
Explain.
But what's that?
Explain.
Okay. This one's good. We can ride down the rabbit hole.
I've not done DMT, but I've been reading about it because again, I think it's all connected somehow, and this is what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of these crazy stories. I used to live in Berlin, and for many years I was really interested in psychedelics, and I wanted to find DMT back in New Zealand. It was really hard to find when we were younger, and to this random happenstance, I met this person in a bus, and we exchanged numbers in about 2 minutes, and we became really good friends. And this person, through this person, I was offered a DMT ceremony or an experience. There's a pipe, and there's this stuff called changa, which is this mix of herbs and the DMT crystals, and you smoke it. Now his condition for me doing this experience was, if you're going to do this, you have to go all the way. You can't say no. To having, you need to have the full dose, basically. He said, if you're going to, if you shake on that, and then, when I give you the pipe, you inhale, and you have to promise that you'll do that. Otherwise it's a waste. It's really hard to get this stuff, basically. He said, okay. So I lay down in this room, in this bed, and this is my friend, and he gives me this pipe, and it's got DMT, and he says, okay, just inhale as much as you can, hold it as long as you can, and exhale, and then we'll do 2 or 3 rounds, and then you should be away. So, okay. So I inhale this pipe. The room goes completely red. This strange kind of geometric shape takes place in the corner, and my friend turns into a lizard person. So the crazy,
oh my God,
a smiling, grinning lizard person. So the crazy thing about DMT compared to other psychedelics, if you take LSD or other things, usually everything kind of morphs and becomes stack symmetries or 3-dimensional symmetries, and it all kind of just shifting and morphing. DMT overlays stuff onto the real world. So it was almost like a Snapchat filter or something, and someone turns into something. It's like that, but he was this hyper realistic, high definition smiling lizard holding a pipe, and he's like, you need to have some more. It's like, I don't think I need any more. And he was like, no, you promise. So okay, I take more, and another large puff, and basically I'm gone, and I just remember falling back, forgetting how to breathe, forgetting what my name was. And he'd told me earlier that if you encounter any nasty entities, he'd had a lot of experience. He said sometimes you can come across these kind of nasty entities. He said, ask for the mother spirit, which I guess is maybe related to the Pachamama spirit from the Amazon. I don't know. But he said, ask for the mother spirit. She's cool. She's nice. She'll look after you. And I remember, I could barely breathe, remembering how to breathe. And I remember asking him that one question. I said, what was her name? I couldn't even remember the name, Mother. And he said, Mother. And then I said, Mother. And then this like jellyfish amoeba entity thing just came through the ceiling, and I was inside of this thing. Like it just came down through the ceiling and put me inside of it. And it had this really intense sensation of an ancient maternal hyper-intelligent being. And it had this really high frequency kind of warbling sound. And I had a kind of dialogue with it where I would ask questions and it would respond in my own voice. Not as an external voice, but I would kind of just get an intuitive response of what the questions were. And yeah, this entity / myself, it might have been a different part of myself. That's one of the things we can get into. But this thing hung around for about 15 minutes. It was super intense, but was trying to calm me down. It showed me this geometric pattern that when I breathed, it would start to flow. And when I stopped breathing, it would stop flowing. And so I think it was trying to get me to breathe because I'd stopped breathing and it was trying to calm me down.
Did it let you know anything you didn't know? So
That's the thing.
was it just a hallucination? Because a lot of people on DMT come back with like, oh my God, I've just now understood things I never understood before, and I would never have known and could never have known.
Data released by Michael Saylor, Executive Chairman of MicroStrategy, MSTR, and a vocal supporter of Bitcoin, confirms his steadfast dedication to the cryptocurrency. MSTR's astounding 3,000% return to shareholders since implementing the Bitcoin standard in 2020 has outperformed Bitcoin's own 64% gain in 2025 and outperformed industry titans like Tesla, 60%, Meta, 35%, and even gold, 40%. Now dominating the performance charts, MSTR's stock outperformed tech behemoths like Apple and Nvidia. Saylor's plan? Endless accumulation. His recent announcement of yet another massive Bitcoin acquisition, 15,355 BTC for approximately $1.42 billion, indicates that MicroStrategy's wager is far from over. They currently own more than 553,555 Bitcoin, and according to their Q1 filing, they intend to raise up to about $42 billion in equity to keep purchasing. Saylor's corporate philosophy is reflected in his advice to individual investors. Consistently purchase Bitcoin, regardless of price fluctuations. He maintains that Bitcoin is a long-term monetary revolution, rather than merely an asset. Despite gold hitting record highs above $3,500, Saylor is still confident in Bitcoin's eventual dominance. For him, the goal is to get a head start on the next global financial infrastructure, not to speculate. His dedication highlights a larger pattern of institutional support for Bitcoin, and his opinions continue to influence the mindset of both novice and seasoned investors.